What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Montana Method podcast once again. As always, your host, Nelson Rodriguez Jr., author and writer of The Montana Method. Today's episode, we have a very special guest, someone I honor and admire very much, a personal mentor of mine who taught me many, many things that I apply in my life to this day. And I would argue that she was single-handedly responsible for transforming me as a human being from day to night. We're going to talk about how we met, the things I learned from her, what she's up to nowadays, and many other cool topics. So, without further ado, my mentor, Millie Huser.
I've been out here hustling all my life. Every day we get into it. Really out here in these streets. That's day and night. Like there's nothing to it. When I was going through it, dog, I never got your call. I never asked for nothing, no. But now I want it all. I promise I'ma do it. Came from rags to riches. Rags to riches. Came from rags to riches. Rags to riches. Came from rags.
Hi, Millie.
Hi, Nelson.
I'm really, really happy to have you in my space.
I am very happy to be here.
How was the trip?
It was great. It was a train and an Uber.
I tell people Miami's a whole other country.
It is, really. Especially when you're coming from North Florida. People don't be like, oh, you live in South Florida. It's so close. Like, do you go to Miami? I'm like, only on occasion. You have no idea about Miami traffic if you think that I drive down here on a regular.
No way. No way. For Pompano and Miami, I don't even know what to compare it to. It's two totally different planets. Yeah,
it is. It's like LA to people are like, oh, you're in LA. You should go right over to, I don't know, Anaheim. And I'm like, have you ever been to LA and Anaheim? That's about equivalent to Pompano and Miami. And South Pump to Miami.
Right. No, it's it's funny. I've tried to live in other places and I can't. I'm so attached to my culture and Cuban food and being able to go into a neighborhood that no one speaks English, and it's just something I'm so attached to, and it's really fulfilling.
I like it too. I will say that even though I was teasing that I don't speak any Spanish, I found my way here just by making a smile and saying, "Can you point me in the right direction?" I do know when I go to places where there aren't any Spanish speaking or everybody is Caucasian and English of background, I get a little bored very quickly. I'm like, ugh, where are my Spanish speaking people? Where are the Haitian people? Where are the Jewish people? Where are the Russian people? Right. I do love Miami for there's such a variety of human beings here in one small area. It's pretty fantastic if you really think about it.
I work in Aventura now, so I see a lot of Russians and a lot of Jewish people. It's pretty cool how one city can have so many different kinds of cultures,
Yeah. You ever just sit and listen to how many different languages and dialects you can hear?
Yeah.
Whenever we go home to my home state, which I was born in Missouri, when I go there, you get to the airport and, you might hear two languages in the airport where you're like, all right, I just heard Spanish and English. You get to Miami and you're like, holy moly, there are so many languages. There are dialects within languages, like the Spanish language, and then listening to all the different dialects of where people are from. I'm like, it's just mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. And that we don't have more problems that we do just tells me that it's a pretty good place to be. Yeah. I mean, there's crime just like anywhere on the planet.
No, what I mean.
But for this many different cultures to be in such a small area, for us not to have a lot of crime tells me that there's something really special going on in Miami area, the South Florida area.
No, and with the amount of people that moved here in the past few years, we have to be doing something right,
Yeah. I was in California for an extended period of time, and I love California weather. I mean, it is, and people are so laid back. It's very cool. About 4 weeks into it, though, I'm like, I gotta get out of here. It is too slow. People are not in a hurry to do anything. It's such an interesting and the resilience. And again, I love California people. I just noticed that in Florida, there's a lot of resiliency. People come from places, like Cuba and Venezuela and places that they escaped as refugees from some really atrocities. And there's some badass people that do that. In California, I will meet people and they're like, "Oh, it's cold outside," and I'm like, "It's 56 fucking degrees." I hope it's okay to cuss.
Yeah, you could.
56 fucking degrees. What are you talking about? I mean, like, get over yourself. Or, "Oh, the traffic's so bad," and I know I'm not a fan of traffic, and I will take a train. If I need to be in traffic, I will be in traffic. They're like, "I can't come to work today. The traffic's bad," and I'm like, "What is happening?" Or, "I have a sniffle. I'm afraid I have COVID. I need to stay home for 8 days. And can you pay me?" And I was like, wait a second. You know, down here in Miami and in Florida, people will be like, "I'm going to work unless I'm dead." They drag a leg on into work, hanging off. You know,
in the middle of a hurricane.
In the middle of a hurricane.
The streets are flooded, you know.
I missed it. I missed the gritty kind of like salt in your eye of South Florida. So here I am. I'm back.
I admire that about everybody that lives here. Some people don't like it because it's a fast-paced lifestyle and people are very, very quick.
Yeah.
I admire it in a way. Everyone's just trying to make it, you know. And
well, where else in the world can you live where you don't actually have to know how to drive because people just honk every time you need to turn or if you stop too long? I mean, like the first time I was in like LA or in California and I sat at a stoplight too long and nobody honked, I was like, what in the world is happening here? Nobody's honking at me or nobody cussed me out or flipped me the bird. I'm like, what in the world? So I think they're both coasts are great in their own ways, right?
Yeah, of course.
You just like where I'm at tells you where I need to be.
For sure.
There might be a time where California was a place for me to be. And I love being there. I just don't know if I would want to live there full time.
I agree. California is a beautiful place.
Oh my God, it's one of the most gorgeous places you could ever visit. I mean, just the mountains and the ocean next to each other is phenomenal. I will say that I love Florida, the Atlantic Ocean. The colors are, I mean, you just can't beat them. They're like bananas and apples, right? Both are fruit, but how can you compare the two? They're completely different kind of fruit.
For sure.
So.
Yeah, I have a friend a coworker of mine, he's from San Diego, and San Diego has to be one of the most beautiful cities in the United States for sure.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's 20 minutes away from the Mexican border, and it's really cool.
La Jolla has the seals on the beach. It's so gorgeous.
That's cool.
So cool. So cool.
So we met back in our gratitude days. So for those of you that I think I've mentioned before, I did a transformation workshop with a company called Gratitude. They're no longer around. And Millie was one of my trainers. So I did a 4-day workshop called Part 1. I did a 5-day workshop called Part 2. And then I did a 90-day workshop called Masterful Living, or ML, which, if you see my shirt, ML 45. And I have to say, everyone I stay in contact with from Gratitude, there's not a day that doesn't go by where we talk and we don't mention, man, I ran into this guy and, oh man, he was being so righteous. I wish. I tell Peter and everyone I stay in contact with, I tell them, man, I constantly run into people that I want to refer to Gratitude. Man, it sucks that it's not around anymore. And
well, it's around in a different way.
It is.
There's other companies. The beauty of it, like speaking of Spanish speaking, SER has a wonderful Spanish speaking three-part program, and North Carolina has 3-part programs. A company called Redesign, All Truth, starting up theirs in New York, California. They are still here in Austin, Texas. I don't know the name of that company though, but it's just different because it's a different. There's different distinctions in there. But for the most part, the three-part curriculum has been around since the 70s.
Wow.
It started off in the 50s with a place called Holiday Magic, which was makeup, and it was a multi-level networking type thing where you bring people in to sell makeup, and they created this training to help people do sales.
Wow.
And then when that closed, there was a gentleman who took it over and created something called Mind Work Dynamics. I believe that's the name of it. And that evolved into something called S Training with Werner Erhard, who was like, I'd call him the godfather of this work.
Oh, okay.
And Werner Erhard, carried that did it for a long time. He carried the torch of it for a really long time. And then they had some problems with it. It closed, and it came as LifeSpring. And from LifeSpring, Landmark has come, and all of these different training and different distinctions have come out of it. So Gratitude was one of those. And when COVID hit, I like to say like, visionaries lose their vision sometimes. And I can't speak for the owner of the company. It just got to where it was impossible to maintain without having the trainings,
Right.
the payroll, all of that stuff. And so it was her opportunity to close up shop and to try some new ventures, and very happy for her and feel good. I really do want to have a South Florida training company that is in English as well, because obviously we have the Spanish one.
Right.
And it's virtual, but to have an in-person English speaking would be amazing. And I know there's some in the works. It's just getting people to get off their couches and, get back out there. I think it's coming quickly, though. I see it being where more and more people are traveling. People are going to Disney. People are tired of being in their homes.
sure.
So I think this is the great opportunity to start a training, maybe in a different mechanism, though. Like, I don't want to say mechanism, let me rephrase that. A different model. So maybe the model needs to shift a little bit, since many companies don't seem to make it, except for Landmark, for 30 years, most
Right.
of them 10 years top, a decade. So I think that might be something for us as trainers and as owners and people of this work. We should recalibrate the way we think about it and get out of our boxes.
For sure.
What we train.
You know what I think is amazing? You brought up the fact that the training model was developed in a multi-level marketing company. My personal development journey, when I got introduced to personal development of any kind whatsoever, was in a network marketing company. I was 18 years old, and I was looking for ways to make money. And a friend of mine, we were trying to make it, and we saw this thing where we could make some money, and it was a network marketing company, and we got exposed to so many good books, so many trainers, so many different seminars, and that's such an interesting field, because it's so, personal development is so attached to the core there, and
It is.
and entrepreneurship in general, but
Yeah, well, entrepreneurship. I think it's the thing that's important is entrepreneurship has a space. It's when you're an entrepreneur, it's not you assess for what's missing and you put it in. And that rate does require personal development, because you are the product. Even when you're selling something, you're always you are your business. There is nothing else. You might, for a while you might do this, and then see there's a need for something new, and then you do something new.
Right.
And you're always ebb and flowing through multiple things. And so, of course, that becomes a place where people want to grow and expand. So they have new ideas. I've heard from a number of people that the multi-level marketing networks have a lot of great opportunities for people to grow and expand. I haven't really had a personal experience with them. I'm trying to think of years ago I had a house cleaning stuff. I became a person who sold it so I could get a discount, and I never sold anything but to myself, and I was always okay with that.
Hey, but there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
No, nothing wrong with it. I don't remember them offering any kind of cool stuff, but I have heard other, like Amway, I think someone told me the other day, is one that has a lot of real big personal growth, and I was like, really?
They're big into it.
Who would have known, So that's very cool.
Yeah, I think, me personally, I wouldn't be here today. It set me on a really good path. It set me to keep. It seared into my brain some really basic teachings, and it wasn't more the business, more just the books and the seminars I went to, and the good things that I put into my brain and my soul. And one of them I talk about all the time is Jim Rohn. He was one of my first mentors or books that I picked up, and he simple things he says, like, don't wish you were easier, wish you were better. Don't wish for less problems, wish for more skills. There shouldn't be less challenges. You just need more wisdom. Simple things like that. It's not the set it's not the blowing of the wind that determines the destination. It's the set of the sail. He was, it's really, really good philosophies that were just seared into my brain. And then more than anything, it was just a constant, the hunger to grow. Yeah,
I think the hunger to grow is the number one thing. I think the curriculum will show up when the hunger is this. It's so funny you say that, because I was a member. I did the 12 steps for many years, and as a person in long-term recovery, I really love that foundation. That foundation was critical to my growth, and I will always tell people that that was my roots. in there it talks about, there's a spiritual kindergarten, that's what the 12 steps are, the guy, Bill Wilson, who was one of the co-founders of it, says a spiritual kindergarten. And that's so true. It just gave me, like, one of the things I always say is wear life like a loose garment. Like, don't get so attached or have it be so binding. Things about money, like problems with money will dog most people. Like fear of insecurity will leave. It doesn't say financial insecurity leaves. It says the fear of insecurity will leave, and that was one of the critical foundations for me, in my starting point of my growth, and in adding to it over the years as things have gone by, and time, and adding different principles and distinctions and evolving it throughout my lifetime. And that's the ultimate goal, is to keep doing the work until the work is done, and then I wouldn't need this body anymore, and I'll be somewhere else, who knows where, but I won't be here in this existence, and that'll be okay. It's such a cool experience. But again, the hunger was there.
For sure.
I wanted something. It wasn't financial security, although I've gotten that. It was, I really just wanted to be a great mom. That's my starting point. I wanted to be a great mom for my children, not for, like, I wanted to be, the best mom I could, but to be a great mom, but I wanted to be a great mom on the outside where people admired me. And then there was a shift where I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I want to be a great mom for my children. And then from that, I was like, for my children to live in this world, I've got to create a world that's worth them living in. And that was the jump from micro to macro when I started becoming a trainer. Was when I was like, oh, I'm leaving this world as a legacy to them. Is this the world I want to leave them? And that was the flip of the switch that had me start seeking. And that's when I found gratitude, was right around that time when I started recognizing that it's not enough just to raise good children. Because they were pretty much raised when I figured that out. Some of them were still in high school, but for the most part, they were on their course. I say all the time that they make up a large, if you think about your life as a book, like they make up a lot of my chapters, right, are them. I am only in the first 3 of theirs.
Interesting.
Then they're going to have all these chapters without me. So, what do I want to leave them? And that was what really was the catalyst that had me go, all right, it wasn't like, oh, my life is terrible. My life on paper was great. And I didn't feel that great, but it was great when I had a friend reach out to me and said, listen, I want you to try this training. What would life be like if, you were, living your purpose? And I was like, what are you talking about? I mean, I knew her from the 12 steps. So I was like, what are you talking about? This crazy stuff. But I was intrigued and I listened and literally went to an intro event. And then that was on like Tuesday. And I started the training on Thursday.
Wow.
That's how good it was in that intro event.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So I had no clue what I was walking into.
Really?
I did it off pure trust. So our emo is the term we use for the person who introduced you to the training. So my emo calls me. She's, Nelson, what's up? And I was super excited to hear from her because we're always talking about positive things and, read this book, go check this out. I'm doing this investment, just always positive things. So I'm always happy to hear from her. And she's, listen, this doesn't really have to do with anything financial. I just remember that you're a guy who always likes to grow. And I'm doing this thing. I don't even know how to explain it. I said, all right, where do I go? Wait, what? Yeah, just tell me when it is. I'll be there. Because I trusted her so much, and I knew her so much as a person. I said, whatever she's referring me to is going to be really good. And I just showed up at the hotel not too far from here in Miami. And that was it. It was interesting. Everybody always remembers me in part 1. I stood up and asked a million questions, and I was always talking. And it was funny because I got a 50-50 response, right? I got the response in the beginning, which I thought was funny because one thing that hasn't changed about me is I don't really care what other people think about me. So some people responded, and they put me, oh, you want some feedback? Sure. I couldn't stand that you got up every 5 seconds. I felt like you were robbing, another person of an opportunity to ask a question. And then I also got, man, I admire you so much. You're not scared of looking stupid. You're not scared of, saying something that doesn't make sense or asking a dumb question. You just ask it, And I said, it wasn't so much that I'm not scared. It's just, I asked myself, what's the worst that could happen, And most of the time, the answer is not much, Yeah.
The worst thing that could happen is pretty much nothing.
Yeah. By asking a question,
Well, it's funny you think back to that. I think about that experience when people said things to me in the beginning, and it was ironic because as many people that said I love your short hair, that many people said I don't like your short hair. And so what do you think that tells us when you get like a 50-50 split? It's like, it tells me who fucking cares. like who cares what people say?
Seriously. Yeah.
Because what one person will love about you, someone else is going to hate about you.
Yeah.
And it's always an inside job. So if you do you
Yeah.
know, whatever that looks like for you. And so clearly I'm still sporting the short hair. So
You do what you want, you know what I mean? And life is short, you know?
yeah, life is too short to stress over what other people are thinking. Now, that doesn't mean that feedback is important. I mean,
Of course.
feedback is such a critical part of the programming because, and the trainer you had, I love it. He says, you know, one person calls you an ass, so what? 2 people, coincidence, 3 people buy a saddle. You know, you're an ass. And I live by that. Like if I hear one, you know, if I'm out there throughout my day and, you know, everybody I run into is an asshole, what's the common denominator there? It's me. And I check in and be like, all right, something's wrong.
For sure.
Something's inside of me that has me seeing the world in this negative light. So let's go back and work on that. But for the most part, that's where it ends. If someone's like, you can't do that, that doesn't make sense, that's not actually feedback. Feedback is my experience of you.
Right.
Is not, I don't like your hair. I don't like your hair is just your opinion. But my experience of you, like, you talk too much. I get that feedback all the time.
Good thing we're on a podcast.
Right?
We got to talk.
Fill the whole hour.
Yep.
But that's feedback that, like, there are times where talking too much is ineffective. When I want to know something about somebody, I want to talk less, listen more.
Right.
And so that's a time when that feedback is important and I want to listen. And then there's other times, like when I'm in charge of a whole room of, how many people are in your group? 50?
Yeah.
50 people in a room that I'm in charge of getting them, keeping them engaged, not entertained per se, but keeping them involved.
Right.
Then talking a lot makes a difference.
For sure.
You know, I still want the pregnant pause, but for the most part, it's important that you keep people engaged. So, like, opinions aren't necessarily feedback, and feedback can resemble opinions in my experience. So I love, though, that people told you talk too much and other people told you didn't talk enough, because, you know, if you hadn't have talked, someone would have told you they didn't think you were talking enough.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You should stop talking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
And it's funny, I even had, check this out, I had a friend who was in part 2 and he did ML with me as well, was Mervin. At first he said, I hated you, man. I thought you were this guy who's just this egotistical guy who wanted to boss people around, and by the end of it I realized I didn't like you because you represented everything I'm not.
Yeah.
You have the guts to go out there and say what's on your mind and lead people and push them to get uncomfortable and do the things they don't want to do. And that's why I didn't like you. It wasn't because of the person you are. It's because of the person I'm not.
Yeah.
And it's so funny how when you're willing to observe, you see these things and you realize these things you wouldn't realize otherwise. I'll tell you another example. The other day, I was in traffic, right, at a red light, and I see these 2 people like getting into an argument in the corner. And the guy was like, I guess he was trying to sell him some oranges or something. And there was this other guy trying to beg for change. And I looked at the 2, and I just had this thought all of a sudden. I was like, here's 2 people standing on a corner, and they decided to do totally different things with their life. Mm-hmm. Right? And then I thought to myself, life is choices. If he would choose to sell oranges instead of beg for money, what would his life look like? And if he would have chosen to beg for money, so it made me think, like, life is really choices, you know?
Yeah.
And that's all from looking at someone in the corner. I know I'm getting too philosophical.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I get it.
But that happens to me all the time now, and a big part of it was gratitude.
Yeah.
You know, like just from observing. Because I did obviously understand that I'm a loud personality, you know. So sometimes when I for instance, in the mornings now when I drive to work, I don't listen to the radio or anything. I just have it shut off and I let my brain just do its thing, you know. And I've learned to be more observant, because when you observe and when you listen to the world, there's a lot to learn, you know.
Yeah, I think that that's the key. Silence. You know, there's so much that happens in the silence, and let me speak for myself. I am uncomfortable with silence because the silence is the unknown. And when I consciously choose silence, it's amazing to me, the thoughts that come to mind and the streams of them. And I have a meditation that I do, and it's called silent meditation. I mean, sometimes it's called contemplative prayer in the Catholic tradition. Different people call it different things. But the thing about it is that it really is just letting those thoughts run through you and not attaching to them. And you do it for 20 minutes twice a day. If you're really busy, 3 times a day, right? And all it is it's like getting past the monkey mind to this other point, because those thoughts are. You ever try to stop a thought?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Next thing you're thinking about thoughts,
Right.
If you let them stream through you, and if you realize that you're attached to a thought, you just use one word or a breath, and that brings you back to this zero, back to this centered space. Centering prayer brings you back to the center, and then the next, they'll flow through you again. It's amazing to me the things that have opened up for me when I'm rich in that practice. I'm not perfect at it, and now I find that I don't do it as much, but I have other meditative practices. But what I realized is that silence is where all of the connections that I have come from. It's when I'm sitting in a silent place or driving long distances with no radio on. That's like golden.
That's the
The
best.
only thing that I always think, I'm like, is I have nowhere to record my thoughts when I have a good one.
Seriously, man.
And I'm like, man, because by the time I pick up my phone and I talk into it, the silence is gone.
It's gone.
And so I just assume that, or I don't want to say assume, but I make up that it will come back at some way, shape, or form. It'll come back in my writing. It'll come back in some point. Those thoughts that I have are not lost.
Right.
They just flew through me and back out again. They're not gone. And any of them that are really important will come back in a vision or somewhere,
Right.
in a loud, booming voice, or someone will say something to me. It'll feel like deja vu. Who knows? But they always come back.
Yeah, most of the time when an idea is really good, it does come back. What saved me now is writing itself is, when I'm in for example, a striking, because I'm writing 7 different things right now. I'm writing a second and third book. I'm writing a comic book. I'm writing, a couple things. So whenever I get these, I think about something, and if I can't come up with an idea, I let it go. And it always never fails. Later on in the day when I'm doing something totally different, I'm driving or I'm talking to somebody on the phone, it'll be just boom, it'll just, So I'm like grabbing my phone and trying to write it down. So yeah, writing.
It's the incubator.
Yeah.
You put it in the incubator. You let it sit there. You go do something else. It's such a strategy.
Yeah.
I'm the big incubator. Like, all right, I've been focusing on this problem for too long. I'm going to walk away and then incubate on it, and then it'll come to me very fluid. Like, it's crazy. It happens every single time.
Definitely. For sure.
So.
You write it. You're just journaling. What writing do you do?
Well, currently I'm writing policies, believe it or not, but
Okay.
But it could be like a lot of times my journals, I keep journals like what you have here. A lot of them are drawings, or they're curriculums, or they're processes that I think about, or music that comes to mind and a process I want to put to it, or some sort of flow that I create. So they're not writings that anybody that look at it and be like, whoa, she was a great writer. They're going to be like, what was she doing? But I'm constantly writing down things. I've gotten so much. I've got this cute little, it's called a notebook of some kind, but it's electronic and you can write on it and it turns into paper. Unfortunately, can't read my handwriting. But it's nice because I don't have as much paper sitting around as I used to. If you look at everything like doodling, mostly process flows. My brain works in those. So I might think of even an idea of like how to get someone from point A to point B when it comes to a training like what you did.
Right.
I'll start thinking about like, oh, what if we had him do this and then this and then this, and then we put the music in there and then we put the lighting here, and that's kind of how my brain works.
That's really cool.
So yeah, or simple as the other day I was sitting there, I was like, why don't we use this building for this instead of that? And then I called this guy who do some work for him. I was like, hey, what about this building for this or that? It was just, and I was in the shower, so like that's the other places your thoughts
funny.
come from.
Right.
And he's like, wow, why didn't we think about that earlier? I was like, well, I needed to take a shower, I guess. And spend some time alone in the shower where my thoughts could just gather themselves.
Right. Yeah.
It's so bizarre. We need those shower things where you can write it in the shower.
Yeah. I need one of those.
Or voice recorder for the shower. So.
That would work, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. I've tinkered. I always tinker with the idea of writing a book because I'm a storyteller. I love storytelling.
I would buy whatever you write.
Thank you.
Having been trained by you is, forget it.
I'm so disorganized in my thought patterns. I thought about taking all my short stories that I say, I just do them in front of people. You know, like there's raw storytelling, there's different storytelling mechanisms. Actually, it's down here in Miami. It's pretty cool. You would be great at it. But basically, it's this thing where you stand up in front of, you know, however many people, and you share vulnerable true stories about yourself for 10 minutes. So
Wow.
I like to do that as a practice. For other works that I do. Every time I get there, I'm like, oh, why am I doing this to myself? Why do I do this? And then as soon as I get on stage and I get the microphone, I'm like, oh, this is why I'm doing it. I'm generating my message to the world. So I have a number of these different little short stories, and I'm like, I wonder if they could be converted into short stories that could be put to paper. Because when I start typing, I'll start typing, and the next thing you know, I'm like, oh, where's the cat videos? Oh, I don't even like cats. You know, like my brain goes in all these different directions.
Listen, as a guy who has to force himself to sit down and write, trust me, I'm there with you. I'm there today. I was writing something, and then all of a sudden I posted a reel this morning of the last episode I dropped on YouTube, and it's 2,000 views in 2 hours. Oh, that's great! And then I'm there liking all the comments and trying to respond to everybody. And then after responding to the 5th comment, I have to put stop.
Yes.
What were you trying to do? Get back to writing. Yeah, you get
book.
it. People love you. I get it. You know.
I have not committed to writing a book for that exact reason, because I'm like, once I commit to it, I know that my word is everything.
Of course.
So I'm like, someday in the future, without putting it by when. So am I really committed to it? Probably not. You know. But I have sent some of my short stories to a ghostwriter and had them turn them into like a writing. You know, like a person. You know, put grammar and transitions in there, and sent it back to me. That was kind of cool to kind of see what it sounds like. It was funny what changed in the story. That was like, wait a minute, that's not how I said that. Was that how I said it? Is that how it, you know, made me question myself a little bit, but it was cool. It was cool to see what that looks like. And so that's definitely a future endeavor. I can do more of that.
For sure.
Just taking my scribbles in my notebooks and making them diagrams. That would be awesome.
That's cool.
So
a book is a legacy. I've learned that.
Yeah.
You know, it's I could die tomorrow, and this is forever. You know.
Yeah, when you have a clear message, books are a great mechanism to get that message out. I mean, I'm very clear about that. Like, I know that's a great. So is documentaries. And I work with some artists who do some amazing documentaries that are, I mean, they're awesome. And I think that's another great mechanism. Social media can be a mechanism. It's a story that's stretched over a long period of time, and different clips of it. So, but it's still a story. Trainings are somewhat a story. It's a 3-chapter book. You know, you just the evolves and builds on the last one. It's more like a textbook than it is like an actual novel, but it's still a book. It has a process to it. So, I think they're all have value to them.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah, it's reading. It's funny that did you know that the average person who graduates high school only reads one book after they graduate for the rest of their life?
That's crazy.
One book.
That's
on average.
crazy.
And they only get through the first chapter.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And then you wonder, some people say, oh man, I don't know why I'm not where I want to be in life. Maybe because you don't look for the information, you know? The information is out there. I remember someone saying this. It's one of the guys that I read the material all the time. I just don't remember who it is. He said, my mentor, we were talking, and I told him, if you had to hide a secret, where would you put it? He said, I'd put it in a book because no one would ever find it.
Have you ever been to a bookstore and looked at all the books that nobody reads? So when I coach authors, I always say to them, don't say you're going to write a book. Tell me how many books, how many people you're going to serve with this message. The book is the mechanism. So you can write a book and have it sit on the shelf. You can self-publish or you can have it published. It doesn't matter.
Right.
The key is your message is being delivered through the vehicle of a book. So how many vehicles are going to be out there on the road? You know, that's the key. And setting it up to yourself. So ironically, I'm coaching 3 authors right now. And of those 3, the one I've been coaching a little bit longer because long story, but she is writing a book on transplants because her husband had a transplant, and she wrote this book about that. And she's getting it into transplant clinics, and she tried to do I'll write 100 pages by then. I'm like, no. Let's go by when will you have, how many copies will be in, hands by when? And when you could see her face go, what?
Oh my God.
I can't project. I'm like, we're going to we're starting at the end, right? So and within how many years, 5 years, how many copies are going to be in hands? And then let's back it up. Where do you need to be in a year to have that happen? Where do you need to be in there? So she finished the book. in about 90 days.
Wow.
And she's got her contacts at a couple of different transplant clinics because that's going to be one of the vehicles she uses to get the book there,
Right.
is through that, or I should say one of the dealerships that the vehicles are being delivered to, so that makes it a little easier. But I'm pretty impressed with her outcome.
That's really cool.
Because she has a great mission and a purpose and the reason for the book, and she's actually starting on her second book now.
That's phenomenal.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it really goes down to like, it's the message. The book is the vehicle.
When you have something to say,
Yeah.
it comes out.
It comes out. It's going to come out when I get podcasts are a vehicle. I mean, everything that you can think of can be a vehicle in order to get your message out into the world. And when you have a powerful message, which all human beings do, they just don't always know they do.
Yes,
Because
100%.
they're, like you were talking about, like people, not reading, which doesn't shock me. I'm trying to think of coming from readers. My dad, my bonus, I was an avid reader when we were young. So, I was used to having readers around. My sister, I remember going to the library as a kid and learning about the Dewey Decimal System. And, people think, like, what is she talking about? But that used to exist back when there was paper catalogs. But that, like those things, like learning those things as a kid, like growing up in libraries, it's so strange to me. And I don't think I read as much as my sisters do, but because I'm also a podcast listener. And I'm a multi-visual person. So I'm an artist. I like documentaries and things, but I'm always wanting to learn something from people. I think a lot of people are drowning themselves out in behaviors like, I'm guilty of it. So I've Netflixed my life, but given that I have a purpose, I don't allow myself to Netflix 24/7. It doesn't make sense. But we live in a world where people want to deaden themselves so they don't have to feel or experience anything because they don't think they can handle it. And so they're, rewatching Friends again.
Funny enough, I'm the guy in the group where lately, people ask, "Oh my God, have you seen this show?" No, I haven't. Man, what are you up to? I'm living my life, which is what you should be doing. But that's a whole nother. Yeah,
I love TV. I love movie and cinematography. It's something I'm very fascinated with. So I love to watch it. And even when I'm watching it, I'm dissecting it from a place of like, oh, how did they get that? Or where could I use that music? In my trainings? Or where could I put that
I'm there with you.
Process? And wouldn't it be great to make that costume? My brain's always looking for how to utilize that stuff as a way. And I know that human beings who, like, let's just face it, if a human being's been watching, let me think of something they've been watching a lot of, like Harry Potter. Right? People love Harry Potter. You can take Harry Potter music and you can take some of those themes and generate breakthroughs for human beings because it's a familiarity that they already know.
100%.
So there is some benefit to watching. It's me watching it versus it having me is the difference. Sometimes I let it have me. I'm like, it's a good day to watch TV and hang out and, I call it my brain rest. Or I'm not thinking or doing anything. I like about one day a week of brain rest where I'm just kind of like vegetating out. And it's my little, what do we call it? Guilty pleasure, I guess you would say.
You're right, yeah.
But I don't even say it's a guilty because guilt is just a useless, it's
emotion.
a way for you to make me, I feel better about myself because I feel guilty that I watch TV. I actually don't feel guilty that I watch TV because I get more done in 5 days than most people do in 7. So I'm okay with taking a full day of watching TV. But you understand, like, it's a pleasure for me and it's a way for me not to be my brain goes 24/7. And so there are times that, it doesn't go 20. I am actually a really good sleeper, but my brain goes for 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so what is the wrong with being awake and not and being in there? The problem is when you make that the goal, and it's like, for instance, I love tea, right? I love cold iced tea. If I put the tea in the glass before I put the ice in, the tea is warm.
Right.
If I put TV and all of that brain numbing stuff in my life before I put the purpose in, I'm never going to have room for purpose. And that's where the dance happens. And I want to make sure that I stay in harmony with that, where I'm constantly purpose driven so that when I do those things, I don't feel guilty. It's a relief of pressure. It's something fun to do with my family. It's something to enjoy, but it's not something I look forward to escape the life I have because I love my life.
Yes.
Is that making sense?
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's 110. You got to, instead of looking at your life like a lotto ticket, that's what I think everybody's waiting on. They're waiting on the lotto ticket. And that could be figuratively. Someone to come and solve all my problems, or something to magically just appear. And
look at our politics.
Yeah.
People are looking for a hero. They're looking for a hero to save them from themselves and their own choices. I'm amazed. Vacations are the other thing. I love vacations.
Vacations
I
are
love
great.
vacations. How many people live miserable lives looking forward to a vacation? And I'm like, I live a great life. I still love vacation, but I can't. It's not that I can't wait for a vacation. A vacation is just something I schedule so that I can have downtimes, like my TV on Sunday. It's a downtime. It's not something that I look forward to because I hate life. It's something that I put in as entertainment.
Right.
And I think that will go back to the political thing. I think one of the things I'm experiencing, which is one of the reasons why I think it's important that the trainings stay around, is, we talk about in the trainings, we talk about win-wins, which is I only win when you win.
Correct.
Right? I only can win if you win. You can only win when I win. That's what it means to be in existence together. As right now we're living in a world where my experience tells me most people think the only way I can win is if you lose. And the only way you can win is if I lose. So there's no win-win. And people are willing to lose as long as they don't lose as bad as you.
Yeah.
Like I don't mind not winning as long as he doesn't win either. And they just it's like this tear apart. And so I've been asking myself, where am I still doing that? I must be, for me to see it, spot it, because I got it, right? Where am I still doing that? Where am I still, because I see it everywhere, with married couples that I coach, with even the news. Anytime I'm watching the news, you listen to these things that I see a lot of people, like hurting people, and it's like, well, I feel so bad. I want everyone to feel as bad as I do, or I want to punish people for my life.
Yeah.
And it's like back to choice. You said it earlier. Who chooses this life? Like let me speak for myself. I have not done my job in having people experience themselves as powerful choosers who generate a life from nothing with their choices. Instead, people experience themselves as victims to their circumstances. So my work's not done, right? It's just not done. I'm not mad. I'm not guilty. I'm not shameful. I'm not bad. I'm nothing. It's not done. It's clear based on results. I haven't had it happen. In fact, in the last 2 years since you did the trainings, my experience tells me that we have gotten further away from the goal rather than closer to the goal. Do I think we're failed? I wouldn't say failure. I would say that it's revealed a lot. The pandemic and the political climate right now has revealed a lot to me about things I just didn't. I was living in a bubble. I my life, I was living in a high rise down on ocean, overlooking the water. And my biggest problem was, like traffic, right? That's my biggest problem. Today I'm like, you know what? I can't separate myself like that anymore. I've got to be boots on the ground, experiencing with people, human beings, the true tragedy of life, which is, you're talking about like, where am I at now? And I'm like, when the trainings dried up, they pretty much, my schedule cleared in a 1 week period of time. I mean, when I mean my schedule cleared, I mean every in-person thing I had was gone. Plus things I had in the works with yachting communities and cruise lines was gone because they were all hands on deck to handle infection control.
Right.
I ended up going back into the treatment industry. I was sitting on my couch one day and I was trying to figure out what's next for me, or where can I fulfill my purpose, because I'm doing it on a small scale, but not where I want to be.
Right.
And I started listening to the news, and they were saying 100,000 people died of drug poisoning, 96,000 the year before. And I was like, holy shit, I have experience, knowledge, and skill in this field. And I'm sitting on the sidelines, and I heard myself complaining about these people aren't doing it right. There's no way these numbers are right. People are clearly not doing treatment right. And then it was a moment where it's like, you're Monday morning quarterbacking. If you're going to complain, get back in the field. And I started kind of putting some feelers out and seeing what was available to me. And, it has been a crazy wild ride because now, equity groups are buying up healthcare, which is behavioral health.
Right.
And so a lot of them are like, can you come work for me? And then I get in there and I'm like, whoa, wait a second. This isn't my purpose. And then so it's been some navigations, but for the most part, I really love taking what I did in the trainings and bringing it back to my roots of treatment industry and helping people in behavioral health and mental illness and drug addiction to really live a fully self-expressed life, which, I mean, who wouldn't want that, you know?
No, I mean, especially someone who's dealing with some sort of mental illness or, I mean, I've never dealt with drug addiction or anything like that, but I have close family members who do, and it's to be a person who can help someone that's in that situation. I can see that as being very rewarding, you know, for sure.
And we talked about the message, you know, like I was meeting with people one-on-one, and now I work with a national company, so I support the directors through numbers. So they send me all their numbers, me and my team, we put it together in a report, we get back to them, we root cause analysis it, we put in what's missing, we help them form new procedures and policies around that, and then they can look to improve the numbers. And it's real time, but we're doing this with them. So like, imagine, like it's everything that I love about the training and back to the medical field, for which, in the medical field, it's not a new thing. I'm in Joint Commission, all of the different accreditations have been making it. I think that the key now is that I have the skill to support people in understanding to actually do it. Most people just would fudge the numbers, make them up, and go about their business. But now this group of people are like, wow, we really want the numbers to be real. We don't want fake numbers. So it's been very cool to take that experience. And the beauty of the trainings and the work, like you wrote a book, right? Like you took your knowledge and you turned it into a message and you're getting it out into the world in the vehicle. Everyone can do that. That's the great part about it. Everyone can take it out into the world.
It's, man, there's just so many things that, this book specifically, so it's funny, my nerd, so for those of you that don't know, we made up a nerd in our training. That's a whole nother conversation.
It equates to your ego.
Yeah. So the version of my ego, you basically came up with a version of your ego and you performed it in front of everybody. And my ego was Tony Montana.
Yes, it was.
So my ego, because Tony Montana, by the end of the movie, he was out of control. He was doing a bunch of drugs, and he killed his best friend, and he went to war with a drug lord. He literally was ego out of control.
Ego out of control is a perfect example.
And then I realized there's a lot of bad that I learned, not that I learned, but that I see in that character. However, there was a lot of good that I saw in that character that influenced my core, my being. And going back to what we talked about, seeing, documentaries and films and things like that and getting inspired from it, I realized there's a big message that I learned from this character that people don't see. That people, they see either the cool story about some dude that gets really rich and, becomes this rich guy, powerful guy, or, the action of the people getting shot and crazy violence and mafia stuff. And I saw it for what it was. It was a tale of a person who became massively successful and acquired way more than he ever thought he could. And him really going into, basically the tragedy of falling into his ego, and then things went wrong. So I was like, you know what? This message hasn't been brought to the world. It's affected me in a very positive way. Let me put it out. And that's what the book is, And I'm working on a second book, which is this was more just an introduction into the topic and kind of getting you into the mindset of how these lessons can affect your life. And then the second book is going to be the manual, more like the rules, the actual rules, and I'm going to list them out, yeah.
I was trying to think back to Scarface and Tony Montana. One of the things about him is, and it's classic to me, is when people build wealth on the outside, but they don't shift the inside. So he was still a Cuban refugee who had a traumatic childhood. Yeah. He hadn't done the inner work, so the outside you'll pull it back in on yourself every single time. I mean, I've seen it in the addiction field where people will, get in recovery, get married, have a beautiful wife, beautiful home, lots of money, and then they relapse. It's like, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Well, because they fixed the outside and they didn't do the inner work. And he's a perfect example of that, where he had all this skill and knowledge and experience to develop, be a drug lord kingpin, find the most beautiful wife, get his family from Cuba. However, we could call them his demons, quote unquote, which I don't really like that term, but that's a, common term they use is egoic self. He didn't do the inner work. He could never fully see who he actually was. Instead, he saw it through these filters. And those filters were not only tragic, but they were also violent. If he really understood who he was. I mean, I remember as a young woman years ago, she was going to leave treatment center AMA, and she was against medical advice. And I remember I was working with her that day, and she said, well, I'm going to go be a stripper because I think it's empowering. I'm like, you're right. It's very empowering. It's interesting, though, because you're choosing that. It's just as empowering to be a CEO. Why wouldn't you choose that one instead? And you could see it in her face, and she's like, I'd never really thought of it. Now, she ended up leaving, and she actually ended up dying.
Wow.
She was one of the real terrible cases down here of being passed around to different treatment centers. It's a whole terrible underbelly of the treatment world, which was one of the reasons I didn't want to work in it anymore. But I think she had a moment there where it didn't resolve the situation, but she questioned it. Like, out of all things I could be that are empowering, this woman didn't tell me I was wrong for what I was choosing. She just asked me why I chose it over something else. Same thing with Tony Montana. All things with his skill, his knowledge, and his experience that he could have chosen to be, he chose drug kingpin because there's something in his mind, I'm going to assert, that didn't think there was anything else for him when he could have been anything with his talent.
He literally could have been anything.
Could have been anything. I mean, you know how much skill it takes to be, I'm going to tell this all the time to drug addicts, you know how much commitment and skill it takes to be a drug addict?
A lot.
If you apply those same principles
Seriously.
to anything else, you would be unstoppable, because they're unstoppable, right? They're unstoppable. Try to stop a drug addict when they want to get high. You can't. Then they get sober and they're like, I can't do anything. It's like, get that hunger back. That hunger is what we're talking about, really. All of this goes back to the hunger. When you have that hunger, you can apply skills and knowledge and things that are going to take you very far. That hunger, it doesn't go away. We deaden it and live half-measure life so that we can be complacent. And it's not a bad thing. It goes back to the story we tell ourselves. Tony Montana, where his background was, told himself this was all he could do. Is the only way I can get rich. Now, how many Cuban people do you know that are rich right now that are not drug kingpins? Many.
Right.
Many. They're some of the hardest working cultures I've ever met, and people very focused as a group. I don't want to stereotype them, but and my experience tells me as a group of people, I've always appreciated the work ethic of the Cuban people and how hard they will work and how much effort they put into their product and how passionate. I mean, have you ever gotten a Cuban sandwich that was bad? Not from a Cuban.
Never.
Or
never.
Cuban coffee that's bad? Not from a Cuban. You might get it from somewhere that's not a Cuban making it, but
No, definitely. One thing, so I was raised with my mother, my father. My great-grandmother was heavily involved in my childhood. So my great-grandmother, all my grandparents, and all their siblings. So all my grandaunts and granduncles. So I was raised by an older generation of Cubans that were more traditional, and they came here with literally nothing.
Zero.
And all of them became U.S. citizens, opened businesses, had successful careers. All of them did so many different things. And it was astonishing to me that, for instance, my uncle who got here on a raft is now retiring from a 40-year career and is living, his best life. He's traveling the world. So I firsthand got to witness work ethic when I was really little, and it was definitely instilled in me by my culture. I'm very blessed to be a part of a people who built a whole city, Miami.
Yeah. Really, Miami is very much built. I mean, it was here before, but it really was the culture of it.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that because I was driving in the train on the way over here, and I went past a neighborhood of looked like predominantly Haitian from the people that were walking around. I was like, oh, it looked like I don't have any idea where it was at, but
right.
It was a beautiful neighborhood. It was very well kept and neat and everything. And I thought, it's interesting to me because so many people I've met who've come from other countries who fought to get here, who have gotten here, who have worked so hard to be here. Sometimes I'm going to put it this, I take for granted things because I was born here and raised here like third generation. There are things I take for granted that they do not. And it's sobering, right? Yeah. Experience for them to share with me. They're things that I take for granted that are so instilled that I'm entitled to.
Yeah.
And they're not. They don't have it the way, and it just shows. And so I don't want to say I'm lazy, but I definitely see where there is a complacency among Americans, myself included. I'll speak for myself, that I have, because it's just always been this way.
Of course.
You know, we talk about that in the training about voting. You know, like we're the one state that, the one United States, voting is a right, but how many people don't do it? Right?
Just because,
Whatever, it doesn't matter anyway. If I ever hear people say, "Who cares? Doesn't matter anyway." What?
Yeah.
What? Yeah. It makes me crazy. But you get what I'm saying? Like they're just, and I know I'm not pointing fingers at all Americans, because I definitely have been that complacent person. I just noticed like the rights to things that, like the having like I'm never afraid to be pulled over by a police officer.
Right.
Ever. I've never been afraid. Never had that fear. Never needed it, really. And when I listen to women of color talk about their sons being pulled over by police officers and the fear they have for them, I've never had to have that for my son. And I take that for granted. And I think one of the things the last 2 years has done is open my eyes to things that I didn't recognize before, which is where I tell you that I don't know that we've moved the goal further, really.
Right.
I think I just see my perspective has changed. I'm not living in that bubble anymore.
Right.
So that's the real message I want to get out to people, is like, you got to get out of your own backyard, your own life, your own culture. You got to experience other people's ways. Yeah. And that's the best gift the training gave me, is being able to see the world through other people's eyes. Like I can't truly ever understand what it's like to be a Cuban man.
Of course.
I'm not going to be ridiculous. And given that I have spent so much time coaching people, that I do have some sort of knowledge about the experiences they have. I didn't experience them myself, but I have some experiences around them that helped me to help me be a more rounded human being. Right. Same thing with being with people of color. Like it helps me to be a more rounded human being. So that's the key that I would like, for the biggest message for people: get out of yourself and spend some time, like the proverbial, walk in another man's shoes for a little while and see what that's like. So that you can really, if nothing else, appreciate your life, or learn, become a citizen of the world.
So I'm an advocate for a lot of the stuff that happens back in Cuba, and people are really surprised because I'm a first generation Cuban American. I wasn't born there. So I've had this conversation with someone before where they ask me, why are you so passionate about the things that happen in another country that you weren't born in? I tell them because I have both sides of the coin. I have the side of my culture, my family, the values they taught me, who they are. They're Cuban, right? So, and then my blood, right? So, and then I have the other side of being an American, where I was born with rights and I was born with freedom, and I can say whatever I want, and I'm not going to get arrested by a police officer for stating my opinion. So, I'm there with you, and I do see that as Americans we do take things for granted. Something, I don't know if I ever told you this. I have an uncle who died at sea. He jumped on a raft trying to get here, and he got lost at sea, and we never saw him again. That's what my uncle was willing to do for a chance at just freedom, just every day, how we live. Just having a chance.
To be able to speak your mind without persecution.
Yeah. They're Cubans right now, they're buying a $4,000, $3,000 flight to Nicaragua. Just to give you an idea of the average salary in Cuba, it's like $40 a month. So they're buying a $4,000, $5,000 flight to Nicaragua and then walking all the way to the United States.
It's crazy to me when I see people at the border and I think what they've gone through to get there.
Yeah.
And I'm not an advocate of open borders. I'm not an advocate of closed borders.
Right.
I think our system is broken, and I don't have the solution for the system.
No,
I've thought about it a lot, and
me too.
And and I don't have the solution. I would just say what we're doing isn't working. So based on results, the thing that gets me though is that again, those of us who are born here take for granted freedom that people would die to get. And it's just, sometimes it blows my mind.
Yeah.
Like, wow, we really have it good. So when people tell me it's not that I don't see the United States for what it is and all of its faults and all that stuff. It's still a great place to live.
Definitely.
Like, I still choose it.
Definitely.
I still choose it. And I experience myself as being lucky or blessed or to have been born here and be free. especially as a woman in the world. I mean, there are places right now where women are dying. I mean, could you imagine me being in a country that you have to be covered?
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, there's so many places I don't think I would make it in. I'm in my foul mouth. I would never.
No,
I would
definitely
never
not.
make it in some countries. And I think, wow, like I was born here, and that's pretty amazing. And I never want to forget that. I never want to forget what And then there was a point where, back in generations, my family came from Germany and Poland, and then someone fought to get here from Europe during a very trying time. And so I'm grateful for them and for that. And, but I don't also want to forget about Ukraine, which is kind of the area where my family would have been from, and that there are still atrocities going on there. We still get to advocate for other countries. Just because we're here, we're not living in the high rise, looking over the ocean and complaining about the traffic. Like we get to be citizens of the world, which means we take actions here and abroad in order to be that world that we want our children to live in.
Whenever I catch someone that was born here that complains about America, I tell them, is there a French dream? Is there a Russian dream?
Right.
Is there a Chinese dream? I think everyone says the American dream.
Right.
So, and again, just I kind of have an advantage really being a Cuban because, we come from a pretty extreme environment.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we even just take for granted just being here. And, I love being an American. I love being a Cuban. And I've been very blessed to be given both perspectives.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, exactly. It makes you exactly who you're supposed to be to write the book that you wrote for the people that you wrote.
Right.
And there are no accidents.
Right.
That is everybody has their people, right,
For sure.
that they speak to. And I think that's, like we're all accumulation of our experiences, and not that at the same time. Those accumulation experience, those stories, when put out into the world to share a message that can move and inspire people to take actions in their life, and that's amazing. I think it's the same is opposite true. Like you talk about two sides of the coin. That's coming from my highest self, that the beingness part of me, the part that is forever, right? The visionary part of me is seeing my story, my past. I had a turbulent childhood, to say the least, right? And those experiences led me to be the woman I am today. Those same experiences at one point were the opposite end. Through my ego and the lens of ego, I was a huge victim, and it was the reason, like, why is this stuff happening to me? And I always say there's this chapter in my book in my brain that goes like this. It's like starts off with why me, which is the victim, to the me too, which is all of us. It happens to all of us. To the why not me. Why not me? And why not me is interesting, because why not me is like when something happens to me and I'm like, why not me? It happens to everybody. And the other part of why not me is when I see that $1 million home, or I see that, that name in the marquee, I can say, well, why not me? There's really no difference between me and that person. So they're all, it's an evolution of myself, really. And we all go through it. Men go through it too. Women go through it. It's this, I think we have coined the Me Too movement, but there's another level to the Me Too movement, which is the why not me movement. Which is why not me? If it's happening to all of these, what is it? 3 out of 4 women will have had an unwanted sexual advancement at some point in their lifetime. I'm going to say it's 4 out of 4, really. I think the other ones aren't agreeing or just not owning up to it, but it happens to all of us, right? If it's happening to all of us, then I love that idea of Me Too. And then the next evolution is, why not me? We're not a victim to this. It's empowering. The moment we understand that we are powerful beings, that we, it's not happening to us, that we weren't the context for it. When I was a young woman, it was just common knowledge that, my first job I was sexually harassed at 17 years old. I told people and nothing happened. In fact, they laughed and people oh, you'll get used to it. You know what I mean?
Wow.
It was not a,
holy cow.
I mean, this was the 1990s. Nobody, I mean, you saw the films we watched, 16 Candles and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, date rape was like a comedy. You know what I mean?
That's pretty wild.
Revenge of the Nerds, all those. My sons watch this and they're like, Mom, you watch these movies? These are terrible. And I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
But the point I'm saying is it was just such a ingrained part of our culture that you didn't even really think anything of it. I didn't feel like a victim. I was just like, that happened. And now I know not to do that, or I know not to stay here or do that. I kind of learned from it. And and it wasn't a guilt or a shame or anything like that. It was like, this was the way it was set up. And then some point we said, no more, we don't want to set up like this anymore. I want to make as much money as men. I want to be able to wear what I want to wear. I want to be able to go where I want to go. And why can't I do those things? But we weren't that context back then. And that context began to shift in early 2000 all the way up to the Me Too movement. And now it's kind of pendulum swinging this way a little bit. And it'll come back to the middle to where it's like, we are also part of that context. Because we didn't, as I'm saying, me, I was part of that context because I didn't have the skills, the knowledge, or the experience in order to assert myself in a way where people understood that was unacceptable. I didn't have that. I didn't even know, and I'm not making myself feel it because I didn't even know it was a possibility. I thought I was just going to live my whole life where people were going to come on to you, you smiled and said, no, thank you. And then you went about your business with a smile on your face. You know, it wasn't until I was like 36 where someone came on to me and I was like, don't you ever fucking shut the door behind you and talk about me ever again or I will kick your ass.
There
like
you go.
I was like,
that sounds like the movie. No.
Right?
Yeah.
Like 19 years later,
Right.
I realized I don't have to take this shit from people anymore.
Right.
But it was a shift that happened. And I think young women coming up today are going to have a whole new experience. They're not going to have the same kind of, it's not the same context. And think about what it was like for my mom. It was that way for me.
Yeah.
What did my mom experience? And then what did my
stuff.
grandmother experience and her mother? I mean, think about it, it's only gotten where we have power now to say no. I bet you back then they didn't even have a power to say no. They didn't even own it. So it's the same thing with the Cuban families. You know, like my prayer for them is they don't lose that hunger and that Cuban families traditionally keep raising powerful Cuban families and not get complacent. You know?
No, I don't think we ever will.
Not here in Miami. We're not
allowed to.
You're not in Miami, not at all.
Definitely not.
It's you'll get run over in Miami if you stop.
Exactly. That's. I thrive in chaotic environments. What can I say? You know?
I do like not living in Miami here lately because every time I come down here, I like visiting. But man, I still get like, wow, this is so fast paced. I'm like sipping tea on my front porch at home.
Yeah.
You know?
You got to put the goggles on or else your eyes will pop out of your head. You know?
Right,
Yes.
right. It is fun, though. It is a fun place to be.
So, Millie, this has been fantastic.
Yes, thank you.
I'm really honored to have you in my space. I typically wrap up all my podcasts. I just ask 3 questions. So, 1, what inspires you?
I am inspired and motivated to create harmony on the planet.
Wow. That's awesome. Okay. What's your dream?
My dream, so I think the dream that I have right now, I have many of them, but the one that I've been focusing a lot of energy on is I want to create communities for people with disabilities where they can live fully self-expressed lives and they don't ever have to leave and it's not based on income or anything like that. Like almost like a retirement home, but for people with disabilities where if they wanted to get married and have children and be citizens and have jobs or not jobs or whatever, but like a community where they could live safe and free from worries that of like families like mine who has a child with disability, what's going to happen to them. So that's like my big overarching dream that all my arrows keep pointing to.
That's awesome. What's next for you?
I should say book, but I'm not going to.
Well,
I'm definitely continue bringing the work that I've been doing for the last 10 years back into the treatment industry, into the recovery world. Really want to create a space where as many people who choose to recover can find recovery, and there's no one way. There's as many ways as people that choose. And that's probably my big right now moment that I'm in.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
Millie, thank you for coming.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate you. How can people connect with you?
You can find me on Facebook. It's probably the best way at Millicent User. That's a great way. I also have my Millicent User webpage. If you ever want to book a time with me or get to know me better, that's a great place too.
Perfect. Alrighty, guys. So that's another episode of the Montana Method Podcast. As always, Nelson signing out. Push it to the limit. The world is yours. And remember, if you're not chasing a dream, life is meaningless, guys. Till the next one.
I've been out here hustling all my life. Every day we get into it. Really out here in these streets. That's day and night. Like there's nothing to it. When I was going through it, dog, I never got your call. I never asked for nothing, no. But now I want it all. I promise I'ma do it. Came from rags rags to riches, rags to riches, came from rags to riches, rags to riches, came from rags.